Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, November the 28th, 2025. Today, Saturn goes stationary direct, and in this video I want to talk about this event in some detail because I think it really does matter. But before I talk about Saturn, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the day. So here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time on Friday, November the 28th. So as far as what's going on in this chart, we have the moon at 11 degrees Pisces. So it's 11 degrees Pisces at noon New York time. And it is a first quarter moon. So, we had a new moon about a week ago, and now the moon has moved on, and the moon is making a square to the sun. So, when you've got a first quarter moon, it indicates that some of us might think, well, it's time for action. We've been working on something since the new moon. It was a new lunar cycle. When was that? When was that new moon on? November the 20th. That new moon, right at the end of Scorpio. And so, we were thinking about this new phase we were in, perhaps some contemplation there, trying to work out what the new rules were. But now with this first quarter moon, it's a time where we have to start to think, well, what is it all about? And what must we do? So it is a call for action. But it's rather different from the last quarter moon. The first quarter moon, it's a waxing moon, and we haven't lost too much time, and if we act in a timely way, we're going to be fine. So for some of us, it might be a time when we have to think about what we're going to do next and how we're going to make the most of everything. And it can be quite an important time of year. It's not quite Christmas, and there's still enough of the year left to do something worthwhile. Okay, it might just seem a couple of weeks, but we can really get things off the ground. And so I think that that first quarter moon may be slightly tense. I mean, the moon is square the sun, but sometimes we need that tension. If there's no tension, how are we going to proceed? So I think I'd be quite positive about this lunation. Or sorry, not necessarily a lunation, but this particular phase of the lunation cycle. And yeah, the moon is in Pisces. It's in a water sign, and this might say something about how we need to plan our next move. Moon being in Pisces is about flexibility. It's about sensitivity. It's about reading beyond surface appearances. So, we just can't assume that things are as they seem, and perhaps we've got to use our emotions and our sensitivity to really understand what's going on. And with that understanding, we can make clear decisions. We can decide, what we have to do. And perhaps that's part of the crisis. I mean, it's not really a crisis, but we've got the sun in Sagittarius. Sun in Sagittarius has that spark, is really ready to do lots of different things, and it's quite excitable. But the moon in Pisces, also an immutable sign, like the sun, but it's about water. It's kind of a clash between fire and water. Fire is a spark, and then water is using one's sensitivity to sort of feel one's way forward. And aside from that, I mean, that first quarter moon is one of the main events of the day. The other main event is Saturn going stationary direct. So what that means is that from the perspective of the Earth, Saturn is coming to a standstill. So it has been going backwards against the background of the stars. So, over the summer, Saturn got into early Aries, then it came to a standstill, and then it moved back into Pisces, went back, got as far back as 25 degrees 9 Pisces, where it is at the moment, and then that's where it came to a standstill. And Saturn coming to a standstill, does matter. Saturn is an important planet. It's one of the planets that rules time. It is one of the chronocrators, along with Jupiter. Chronocrator meaning the ruler of time. And so when Saturn comes to a standstill, things might change. We might be looking back over the summer, over the over the autumn and the summer, this time where Saturn was retrograde, where things maybe weren't quite as clear, and we perhaps, or many of us, wanted to go back into the past. But now Saturn is going back as far as it's going to go, and it's going to move forward. It will go into Aries. I think it goes into Aries, I think it's on Valentine's Day of next year, on July the 14th. So there is a change here. And, when you're talking about a planet going stationary, it becomes extra powerful. And, you have to think, what is that planet doing when it goes stationary? I mean, one thing, for example, it's going stationary very close to a trine of Jupiter. And I really do think that matters. And I will be talking about that, in some detail, I hope, at the end of this video. So that's, that's the main stuff going on. Mercury is still retrograde, by the way, but not for long, because I think it might be over the weekend. Mercury goes stationary direct. So we do have Mercury and Saturn going stationary direct pretty much at the same time, and that gives us a double hit of change. And I will be trying to sort of synthesize all of that into some overall feeling about what does that all mean. And again, I'll try to look at that at the end of this video. So that's the picture in New York at noon. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, here's the chart again set for noon. Moon's still in Pisces, so when you look at the chart set for Sydney, the moon is generally going to be, about 7 degrees or something like that behind what it is in New York. And so if you are up very early, and if you're in Australasia, I mean, then the moon might still be in Aquarius, but I think you can pretty much regard the moon as being in Pisces. And I don't think there's a great difference between what's going on in the Americas and what's going on in Australasia yet. It is all about Saturn going stationary direct. It's also about the moon being in Pisces. So now let me switch to the heliocentric view. So if we set the chart with the Sun at the center of the solar system, look at Saturn and Neptune. That heliocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction is getting closer and closer. It's now just 21 arc minutes apart, and so we know with that conjunction there is this growing sort of uncertainty. It's not necessarily outright pessimism, and in fact I don't think we need to be pessimistic. I think that the Saturn going stationary direct from a geocentric point of view maybe actually cause for optimism rather than pessimism, but still we just don't know what's going to happen. And I think that we are picking up on that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, that heliocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And of course, geocentrically, now that Saturn is going stationary direct, we can start thinking about the geocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which will happen sometime next year. Early next year, but anyway, I've got plenty of time to talk about that. And Mercury, yesterday we had a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury and Jupiter are still pretty close to one another. With Mercury conjunct Jupiter, it provides a degree of optimism. So I'm not saying that we're in a pessimistic time, really. So the Saturn Neptune conjunction, heliocentric conjunction, is just one thing going on, and yeah, sure, there might be uncertainty, but at the same time, we can look on the bright side with Mercury conjunct Saturn heliocentrically, and Venus joins it. So Venus is at 14 Scorpio heliocentrically, and it's moving towards a trine of Jupiter, and so Venus trine Jupiter, again, there can be a feeling of happiness. If we decide to be happy in the right areas, that's always the important point, isn't it? We have to use our time in the right ways. I mean, some things can make us miserable. Other things can really be, delightful. I've never used the word delightful before. I think that is a bit of an exaggeration. It sounds a bit light, but it is Venus trine Jupiter. I mean, Venus trine Jupiter is a good aspect, and with Venus trine Jupiter heliocentrically, I'm confident we can feel good about ourselves, especially as we've got Venus trine Jupiter in the geocentric chart as well. So that Venus Jupiter energy is really strong at the moment, and so there are always ways to enjoy ourselves, and we should just make the most of whatever is being offered, and perhaps not ask too many questions. If we ask too many questions, that might spoil things. I mean, we still need to have a critical mind. We don't want to enjoy ourselves in ways that are short-term and ultimately destructive. And additionally, we've got Mars making a trine to Chiron. So heliocentrically, Mars trine Chiron, I see that as just wanting to be different. Mars is how we apply ourselves, how we use our energy. And the question is, do we use that energy in a constructive way? What are we trying to achieve? And with Mars trine Chiron, we might be trying to achieve a distinction. We want to be distinct. We want to stand out as being someone different. We just don't want to just do things in the same old way, just be ignored. We can try very hard. We can get angry, and it's all for nothing. And that's not the way we want it with Mars trine Chiron. And if we want to make an impact, I think that it should be quite easy. You could also ask, why do we want to make an impact? Well, we might want to make an impact because of some past wound. When we think about Chiron, we do think about the wounded healer. So there could be some wound which is encouraging us to escalate, to take things further, to feel that this time round we are not going to be ignored. So that's the broad planetary picture. And now I want to switch to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, November the 28th, 2025. Aries. Well, we were just looking at the heliocentric chart, and in the heliocentric chart we saw that Mars was making a trine to Chiron, and I think it's quite possible you do pick up on this trine. And Aries, you might feel that you do want to make an impression, you do want to get noticed, and the question is that a good thing? Now, it's possible, Aries, that you're quite random about it. You decide to make something of an issue just because. And yeah, sure, you can get noticed, you can get attention, but it's going to be just somewhat forced. So if you are going to make an impact, and I said I think you can make an impact today, then you've got to choose your ground carefully. You've got to choose something that is worth getting attention for, and indeed which is worth taking a risk for. And when I talk about risk, I think I'm not talking about physical risk. I'm talking about the risk of embarrassment, social risk, because if we want to stand out, sometimes it can be very effective, and sometimes it can be a disaster. We must make sure that we stand out for the right reasons, and so that might be your challenge. And at the moment, Aries, it's quite easy to make mistakes. You could try to understand what's happening. You can try to understand what people are thinking, but it is possible that you reach the wrong conclusions, or you might reach your conclusions. Well, it could be based on someone else misleading you. It could be based on you misleading yourself, having feelings that you're not completely familiar with, or jumping to conclusions based on the emotional, and perhaps being over emotional. And you get your attention, you stand out from a crowd, but you do it for the wrong reasons, and the results may not be desirable. So this does mean, Aries, that a cautious approach may have its advantages. You don't have to get noticed. Even if you want to get noticed, you don't have to do anything. And perhaps for many Arians, the best way forward is to work things out in your own way, bearing in mind that there is a first quarter moon, and this first quarter moon, we have the sun in Sagittarius, and the moon is square. The moon in Pisces is square the sun. So, the sun in Sagittarius, you could say, well, that represents all the things you're trying to reach out for. It's you trying to be adventurous, trying to make things more exciting. And the moon in Pisces is saying, that's important. It's important that you are able to take things as far as you can, but not so fast. You don't have to do it quickly. You have to feel your way through, and that does mean using your sensitivity and using what you trust, what's worked in the past. And that might sound very boring, just concentrating just on the past and what happened to work, but that is a good survival strategy. And so familiarity can go a long way, and familiarity with your past and doing something that you are familiar with, rather than feeling that you have to move onto new ground. Additionally, there are things that just need to be thought through, felt through, in your own way, and sometimes it's best to just keep quiet. May not be what you want to do. You might want to make a fuss. You might want to make your feelings clear, but I would suggest that in most cases a bit of quietness can be useful, and contemplation. And yesterday I talked about the fact that Mars is conjunct true black moon Lilith. I mean, Mars is still pretty close to a conjunction of true black moon Lilith. I mean, it's true black moon Lilith at 17.5 Sagittarius, Mars at 17.36 Sagittarius, so it's quite a close conjunction. And that Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith indicates to me that there is a lot for you to work through, and that's another good reason for keeping things relatively secret, for keeping yourself to yourself, because black moon Lilith, I mean, I do think that black moon Lilith can represent the past, things from the past, things you might not always be comfortable with, also aspects of who you are. And you don't really want to work through black moon Lilith in a public setting, and that is perhaps an issue, Aries, with being too vocal. Because if you are too vocal, if you make too much of an effort to stand out, then true black moon Lilith may kind of make its influence felt, and there is a nastiness to true Black Moon Lilith, particularly if it isn't properly understood. And that is a good reason why it might be better if you kept a relatively low profile over the course of the day. Taurus, you're feeling relatively happy, I think. You're feeling that things are better, and that you are maybe sort of enjoying yourself, enjoying whatever is around you, and you don't have to get too worked up about anything. And so, Taurus, I think the best approach for today is to just be as broad-minded as possible, and to see what other people have got to offer, because I think that other people today might have quite a lot to offer, if you give them a chance. And I think that from a social perspective, you can be pretty effective. The moon is in Pisces. It's in mutual reception to Jupiter by sign. In fact, the moon is starting to make a conjunction to the North Node, and so with the moon conjunct the North Node, seeing things in a social sense, in a collective sense, might be the way forward. It's not all about you. I mean, you are important. Your creativity matters, but it's not the only thing going on. And it just could be that if you want to be yourself and be creative and make a unique contribution, you first of all have to understand the social environment. And if you are socializing, that might make you feel real, and that you're doing something useful. But I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be completely easy. We do have a first quarter moon. The moon in Pisces is square the sun in Sagittarius. I mean, part of you, Taurus, would like to hold back. Why bother dealing with other people and their problems and their issues? Perhaps you might take the view that you've got enough on your plate. You don't want to worry about what other people are doing. But that is perhaps the tension there with this first quarter moon. You are aware of yourself and your concerns, and you're aware also that we live in difficult times when things do very often have to be taken seriously. But Taurus, I think that by checking out what other people are thinking and what they're doing, understanding their perspective, I think that could be really very important. And at the same time, Taurus, you can have a generally expansive view. You can start to see where the possibilities lie, and you can do something that in its own way is useful, not just useful, but it can just reflect what's going on all around us. And that means that you should try as much as possible to be curious about what's going on in the world, in your world, but beyond your world. I mean, your world is everyone's world. You don't want to restrict yourself. And so by taking things as far as you can, I think that would probably be the right approach. And don't get caught up on things that are incredibly short term. You might have things you want to achieve short term, but you've got to think about the longer term. What matters. Not just tomorrow, but what matters, over the next few years. And so, aligning yourself to the future would be a really good strategy, I think. And as far as relationships are concerned, it cannot be avoided that Venus is making an opposition to Uranus. So, Venus at the moment is in late Scorpio. Oh, don't forget, Venus, your ruler, is about to change sign. It's about to move into Sagittarius. And Venus in late Scorpio is making an opposition to Uranus. I mean, this opposition to Uranus is going to get closer over the next couple of days, and this might say something about relationships and how you manage them. With Uranus moving through Taurus, this can be a time when your individuality really does matter to you. You want to be different, you want to be special, you want to be noticed, and yeah, you might want to do things that are different. But then Venus is opposition Uranus. So if you're too into yourself and you're too into your unique world, well, that itself could cause problems. And your own desire to do things differently could, in certain circumstances, trip you up. I mean, that really is possible. So, don't take things too fast. And when it comes to relationships, be aware that you don't necessarily have as much control as you'd like to. Venus is still in Scorpio, and if you're making sort of big decisions or you want to say something, then maybe you should wait. Perhaps wait until Venus goes into Sagittarius. At the moment things are a bit unstable. Although it could be the case with Venus opposition Uranus, if you want to create waves, if you want to change a relationship or make your real feelings felt, well, with Venus opposition Uranus, there's no doubt you can make an impact. But I think the problem might be, and this is a problem that some Taurians sometimes do have, is that they can work themselves up. They can get annoyed about something, and they can just get ready for some big showdown. This is enough. This has got to stop. And then they have this showdown, and somehow it can be unsatisfactory, and they can get really annoyed with themselves for feeling they weren't able to see things through or to make their point. And perhaps, if it's a meeting with another person, you had high hopes, but somehow you just weren't able to express yourself as much as you would like. And this might be a feature of Venus being in late Scorpio opposition Uranus. And so, if you are planning on any form of showdown, well, make sure that you really are able to see it through, because your position just might not be quite as strong as it should be. And so that might be another reason why dramatic encounters should perhaps be left perhaps until for a later date. At least wait until Venus moves out of Scorpio, and that is a big change, and I think it's a change which is probably fortunate. But anyway, I'll be going into the details of that sign change in a few days' time. Gemini. It's a Friday, and you want things to happen. You're quite insistent about it. I think it matters to you, Gemini, that you are able to get results. I mean, I hope that's the way you feel. I mean, different Geminis have different views. But if we look at this chart, we've got the moon in Pisces, and the moon is in a pretty good position in Pisces. It's in mutual reception to Jupiter. Moon is also starting to make a conjunction to the North Node. North Node is in Pisces, and of course we also have Saturn going stationary direct. So a lot of things going on in Pisces, and Pisces is an important sign. And so Gemini, think about what it is that you want to do. You want to get off the ground. What do you want to achieve? What do you need? And have you left it too late? I don't think you have left it too late. But it is the end of a week, so it's important to slack off. Of course, in the United States, so Thursday was Thanksgiving, and so Friday, I think Friday is something else. It's got another day. It's some kind of holiday on Friday. But that could be an irritation, if other people are not fully with it. If you're in the United States, perhaps they're still recovering from Thanksgiving. As far as you're concerned, you just want to get on with it. And if you're not in the United States, well, perhaps that makes things easier because you don't have to worry about the aftermath of the holiday. So, whatever your position, whatever your country, Gemini, really try to make the most of Friday and try to avoid excuses. Excuses. Well, I can't do much because everyone's still recovering from something. You have to make it happen. You can make it happen, and there might even be a sense of urgency here because we have a first quarter moon. So the moon in Pisces is square the sun in Sagittarius, and that square might be about loyalty and the question of how loyal you should be or can be. And it's possible that your ambitions run counter to what another person is expecting. And that something is important. You're also aware of ties of obligation. And maybe that's just something you have to deal with. You have to show that you are a reasonable, responsible person, but also show that you have definitely got things you want to achieve. And it's important that you're not held back. I think you could be held back if you spend too much time listening to the wrong people, or if you're too much in the mood for compromise. But I don't think you will be. And so Gemini, really think about what it is that you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to get off the ground, and don't be put off by other people's attitude or by other people's laziness. I mean, sure, you can make some effort to understand their viewpoint, but there's a limit to how long you can, or to what extent you can sort of accommodate other people's needs. And Gemini, at the same time, Saturn is going stationary direct. Now, this does matter for you, Saturn going stationary direct. Saturn has been back in Pisces for a couple of months now, and because Saturn was in Pisces for a few years, then it went into Aries over the summer, and it went back into Pisces. Just to remind myself when it went back into Pisces, it went it was the end of August, actually. End of August. So since the end of August, Gemini, you may have felt that there was old ground that you wanted to cover again. Might have related to your work or your career, or it just could be everything you were trying to achieve, the whole way in which you were trying to move forward. And when Saturn moved back into Pisces, there was renewed pressure. It's like an old pressure had come back into focus. And now with Saturn going stationary direct, it's now going to go forward again. In February, Saturn will be in Aries. So this might start a period, lasting a couple of months, where you feel that you have to get something back on the rails. Something didn't work out quite as well as you'd expected, and now you have a chance. Particularly now Saturn is direct, and so it's not necessarily going to be easy, but it's important. And if you give yourself a chance, I'm really confident that you can really benefit from Saturn's movement through the last 5 degrees of Pisces over the next couple of months. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, I've already suggested that relationships shouldn't completely dominate your attention. There are other things you need to be thinking about. There are your ambitions, whatever it is you want to do today, but relationships can't be ignored. I mean, the moon is square the sun. The sun is in Sagittarius. The moon is also in mutual reception to Jupiter by sign. So it may be that there are different kinds of relationships today. Some relationships could just be a drag on you. They could just take up too much of your time, and these relationships may sort of crop up at the wrong moments. You're trying to do one thing and then someone else is telling you to do something else, and that's a kind of a relationship dynamic, isn't it? Especially if that relationship is of a professional nature. On the other hand, other relationships, closer relationships, they still matter because of the stuff we've got in Sagittarius and the fact that we've got the moon in mutual reception to Jupiter. So you maybe just have to ask yourself, who is helpful, who is useful, who is supporting. I mean, a bit of support could be really helpful at the moment, and I think that there are people who want the best for you, and you should therefore focus on such people. Other people are just being annoying, and they're creating problems where really no problems exist. So it's true that other people can't be ignored, but at the same time you have to decide who is important and who can help you achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. Cancer, you know what the right thing to do is. You just know. You don't have to be told. And so it's a situation where you can very much trust yourself to make the right move. Now, it's possible that you have to deal with opposition. There might be particular pressures on you being perhaps told that there's something you absolutely have to do, but you should be doing something else. You maybe shouldn't be putting yourself first. You should be listening to what other people are doing. But I don't think so. I think that, right now, Cancer, you just have this sense of where to go. You have a good sort of sense of direction, and also a sense of moral direction, knowing what is good, what is bad, and well, this can be a Cancerian thing. Once Cancerians make a decision, they can be very sure of themselves, and it's always dangerous to try to contradict a Cancerian, because Cancerians very often do know how to look after themselves, and they can have a strong sense of right and wrong, and interference is not something Cancerians want. And what kind of interferences might we be talking about? Well, it could be about approach. There may be an expectation that you approach things in a particular way, that you organize your routine according to someone else's plan or according to the accepted tradition, and if you decide to do things differently, well, there might be criticism, there might be pressure on you to change your mind. But I really do think, Cancer, that you can hold firm. You really do know what you're doing, and you also know what you believe. And I think that belief may be quite a big feature of today. The moon is, of course, your ruler, and the moon is making a conjunction to the North Node, and also the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter, and this means that you can trust your feelings to believe in the right things. And there are always pressures. There are different things you could believe in, but you're going to believe in the right thing, and you're going to be able to put your faith in the right thing. I don't know how important faith is, but we all need faith at a certain level, and sometimes people put their faith in the wrong things, but you're not going to put your faith in the wrong things. I think that Cancer, you know where you're going, and in most cases you probably shouldn't listen too hard to what other people are saying, although it's quite possible that the people that matter are the people who are saying things that fundamentally you agree with. And one thing we do have today is Saturn going stationary direct, and so Saturn has been going retrograde, over the course of the summer and autumn, and now it's stationary. And from a Cancerian view, this might say something about other people, and perhaps important people in your life. So if you look back over the last few months, think about those people and how they've been behaving, how present they've been. Have they always been there for you? Maybe they've disappeared, or they just haven't been as committed as usual. But there is a change, and it's really quite a fundamental change, and it's a different attitude, and maybe you're seeing someone being more positive and more present. And so as far as relationships, particularly long-term relationships, that could be quite a good thing. Watching someone become more definite, and the right people can certainly come up with the goods, and they can sort of give you what you need. But as I've already said, not everyone is a plus in your life, particularly the kind of people that are overly opinionated, unless, of course, their opinions match yours. And maybe that's what it's all about. In terms of other people, you don't want to have ideological clashes. You don't want to be with people that you have maybe political disagreements or religious disagreements. Everyone needs to be saying the same thing, have the same basic moral code. And if everyone has the same moral code, then I think that things should be okay, at least as far as relationships are concerned. But when we talk about moral codes, it's not about restricting yourself. You should not restrict yourself. It is a time for seeing everything that is available, and with the moon and Pisces in mutual reception to Jupiter, and moon and Jupiter are in each other's signs. There's a lot that's available, and you can feel that things are moving in a particular way, and you may be quite sensitive to the way everything is unfolding, and you almost can know what's going to happen next. But with Saturn going stationary direct, actually Saturn might have gone stationary direct yesterday evening if you're in the Americas, but with Saturn going stationary direct, you do need to think forward a bit, because now that Saturn's going stationary, it will eventually go into Aries. It goes into Aries, in February. And so the next couple of months might be a time, Cancer, for you to really fine-tune what you believe in. And I've already said that you can trust your own beliefs, but that doesn't mean to say that your beliefs are static. And I think over the next couple of months you can start to work through everything that you believe in and everything that you trust, and what you can almost pay allegiance to. What are you paying allegiance to? Well, I mean that really in a spiritual sense. What is that higher force that you regard as being sacred, as being something that can guide you? And there is some work that perhaps needs to be done there, and because when Saturn changes sign in February, that does matter, and you'll be perhaps taking everything you've worked out, everything you've believed, everything you believe in, what your faith is, and you'll be having to make it real, and it's going to be guiding your way forward. When Saturn goes into Aries, and I think that is going to be a very important sign change. Sure, you've already had a taste of Saturn being in Aries, earlier in the year, but it was quite a brief taste. And Saturn moving into Aries is very much about your ambitions, and ideally, your ambitions need to synchronize with your belief system, and so that perhaps is an area that you need to be working on over the next couple of months. Leo, things can happen that you perhaps weren't expecting, and I think that is probably a good thing. And I'm thinking particularly of the social environment, who you are meeting, and everyone the people you're trying to get in contact with, and there could be some surprises, things happening that you hadn't necessarily planned for. And being a Leo, you can sometimes be slightly stuck in your ways. You want things to you want things to unfold in a particular way, and when there is a surprise, you sometimes get flawed. So when dealing with other people and social situations, you really should be open-minded, because things can happen that you hadn't really thought about, and you've got to allow people to do things which are unexpected. Well, do things within reason. You've got to allow people to be individuals, and that really does matter. And at the same time, there could be sudden meetings, but there also could be sudden departures. So that there is a sense of perhaps instability in your social life, but it could be quite exciting. And I think that you shouldn't be upset by it. It may be something you can actually relish. But that is not the whole picture. There is you. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And now that the moon is in Pisces, making a conjunction to the North Node, that talks about your own power and also your own emotionality. And with the moon conjunct the North Node, the way forward to an extent is to take yourself very seriously, to take your feelings seriously, and not to assume that anything is straightforward. A lot of things are completely unstraightforward. It's just the way it is. And if you think that you can just understand things just by looking at them, just by looking at their surface appearances, well, I think you'd be mistaken. And you have to be ready to ask questions and to understand what is at stake. And in the process, it's probably a bad idea to be too trusting. You would like, in some respects, to be trusting, to accept what people say at face value, and that's especially the case when it comes to money. Just assume that everything is straightforward, everything is simple, people will honor their obligations, but not necessarily the case. And so by being complicated, by assuming that things are just going to be far more complicated than expected, I think you'll be doing yourself a favor. And one thing going on today is that Saturn is going stationary direct, and with Saturn going stationary direct, it could be about a movement, it could be about a change of mind, it could be about someone or something being in a state of reversing their position. And Saturn may well be relevant as far as relationships are concerned. After all, Saturn rules Aquarius, and Aquarius is your opposite sign, so Saturn is important for relationships, and it can say something about how relationships are unfolding. And with Saturn going stationary direct, it just could be that someone is changing. Someone has perhaps moved as far as they can in a particular direction, and now they're moving back. So it could be, for example, that if someone has been distancing themselves from you over the last few months, they might be coming back into your life slowly. It's not a fast process, but it could be that also that someone is having a change of mind. So if you spend a lot of time with another person, you do think about what is going on in their brains. What are they really thinking about? Are they having any realizations? Are they having second thoughts? Have they decided on one course of action and now they're thinking about a completely different course of action? So that is certainly a possibility with Saturn going stationary direct. So it's important to be sensitive today. With all those Pisces planets, it's the moon, really. So that sensitivity can really sort of see you through, and by understanding other people and what other people might be experiencing and how their minds might be changing, I think that could be useful. And it links back with what I was saying right at the beginning, that in terms of your social life and other people might be a law unto themselves, and they might do things that you weren't necessarily expecting. But why wouldn't you be expecting it? Perhaps because you hadn't used your sensitivity enough. But if you were to use your sensitivity, then there may not be so many surprises. Because deep down, Leo, you know what people are like, you know what motivates them, and so when they do something different, it shouldn't necessarily be such a big surprise. Virgo. Right now, Virgo, we have Mercury is about to go stationary direct. I mean, I've talked a lot about Saturn going stationary direct, but very soon it's Mercury's turn, and so perhaps this whole Mercury retrograde thing, which may have been having an influence on you, it may have been making things more difficult. Things might have been slower than usual, but things are definitely changing, and I do think that they're changing for the better. So as far as when Mercury goes stationary direct, I mean, it's in a couple of days' time, but to be precise, it's on Saturday. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it will be on Sunday. So over the weekend, Mercury goes stationary, and Virgo, you're probably already starting to feel it. You're starting to feel that maybe things are making more sense, and you're feeling that you're maybe now ready to do something that you had perhaps you'd put it off, but now things are definitely sort of moving, and probably moving in your way. And don't forget that Mercury goes retrograde goes stationary direct, at around 21 Scorpio. And when Mercury starts going direct, it will be making a grand trine. It will be making a trine to Jupiter. It will be making a trine to Saturn. And maybe already you're starting to feel those sort of Mercury Jupiter vibes. If we look at the heliocentric picture, we've just had Mercury trine Jupiter, and that Mercury trine Jupiter is still in action. And so with Mercury trine Jupiter, you're starting to feel a sense of optimism. It may be rather ill-defined, but as far as you can see, things are slowly moving, things are slowly working in your favor, and you can start to see possibilities. And when Mercury goes direct, these possibilities will be even clearer. And at the same time, Virgo, I do think that your energy levels are starting to rise. I mean, maybe rise quite substantially. You're feeling that you can make things happen. Even though Mercury is retrograde, but Mercury won't be retrograde for much longer, but you can make things happen. That you can be a powerful force. And if you feel nervous, today. The reason you're feeling nervous is probably because there's something you should be doing that you're not doing. So, Virgo, I think as far as possible, it's important that you are active, and because you can't keep it to yourself. And so, activity is the way forward, and activity can take many forms. It may be verbal activity. I mean, you've got to be careful that you don't say the wrong things, but I think that, once you start talking, you can be quite effective. And then you have to think about who you're talking to, who are the other people. And the moon has now gone into Pisces, and the moon is making a conjunction to the North Node. And although you feel active and you feel that you really want to make things happen, you do have to consider what other people are doing, and the overall social environment. And it's not a problem. I think that you can benefit from other people, and if there's a choice, doing something on your own or doing it with another person, then I think that in most cases you should go for the teamwork, go for the cooperation. If you do something on your own, you might be successful up to a point, but there are going to be limits. But if you do something with other people in a team, it doesn't have to be a big team. It could just be another person. But that can create a dynamic which may work out sort of better than expected. Especially as Saturn is about to go stationary, is stationary direct. So Saturn stationary direct can be about something moving, someone who had been unreasonable in the past, perhaps, but now they're starting to lighten up. So, I think, overall, Virgo, you should make a special effort to consider other people, not least because there's a first quarter moon. Sun in Sagittarius, moon in Pisces, in your opposite sign. And with this first quarter moon, might be about you realizing that something has to happen, and if you want something to happen, you might need another person's help. Libra, you are feeling that you perhaps need to take things slowly. You don't want to be in a hurry, and you want to make sure that everything is done properly. And with that approach, I think it's important that you do take it slowly, and you're also aware that a change is happening. And you can see that change. Venus is about to be an opposite. It's about to be opposition Uranus. Venus in late Scorpio, moving towards an opposition of Uranus. Venus is also getting ready to move into Sagittarius, and for Libra, that's certainly a big change. Definitely a change for the better. Venus going into Sagittarius, but short term, you want to be well prepared, and you want to be in control. And you should be in control. And in a way, what you're doing is you're kind of preparing the ground for something, and you want that preparation to really be as good as possible. And it really can be really very effective if you just give yourself the chance, and you don't allow yourself to be distracted. And you can be distracted by many different things. You could be distracted by your own worries and your own concerns, even your own insecurities. I'm not saying you're insecure, by the way. I'm just saying it's just one of the things that could be a distractor. It's always difficult to focus on something with everything you've got if you've got other things that you're worrying about. But you should really try to be realistic and try to get things out of the way, and what's important. No one can tell you what's important. Indeed, it's possible that your own emotions are telling you what's important. So if something is unbalancing you. If something makes you feel bad, then perhaps that's the first thing you need to correct. You correct it, and then you feel better. Then you find something else that is displeasing, you correct it, you change it, and straight away you see the advantages, you see the benefits, and that is the way forward. And in the process, make sure that everything is as how you want it, and do think about your body and making sure you look after your body. Thinking about the body. It is a time when there are no planets in Earth signs, and okay, Uranus is in an Earth sign, but Uranus is an outer planet. I wouldn't treat Uranus as part of the elemental count. And so with that lack of Earth for everyone, some people are just forgetting their bodies and not looking after themselves as much as they should do. But Libra, you are in a position right now to concentrate on your health, on a sort of physical, mental, spiritual level, at all levels, your health. So, think about what needs to be done to put you in balance, to make you feel comfortable, harmonious, and making sure that you're in tune with everything. And in the process, you don't have to be super imaginative. Absolutely not. It's not about having necessarily wonderful ideas. You've had the wonderful ideas, but if there's no point in having wonderful ideas if you're not feeling great, if you're feeling under the weather. And so if you want to really see things through, if you want to make the most of who you are, then you've got to make sure that you're feeling good about yourself. And I think that might be a theme, not just for today, but as you move into the weekend, do put yourself first, and put your physical and psychological well-being first. That is really what matters at the moment. And I'm not trying to scare you or anything. I'm not saying that there are indications of bad health. I'm rather saying that there are things you could do to make yourself feel even healthier. And also Saturn is going stationary direct, and Saturn is a planet which has a connection with Libra, because Saturn is exalted in Libra. And with Saturn going stationary direct, you may again be thinking about how you are running your life, how you are organizing everything, and it just might occur to you that things could be better, and indeed things will be better. But that doesn't mean to say that things aren't fine today. I think that they are fine. I think that provided you're able to be in control, you look after yourself, I just don't think you've got much to worry about. Scorpio. Saturn is going stationary direct. I'm telling most people that Saturn is going stationary direct, and it's something that we all have to think about. And the question is, what does it mean for you? And with Saturn going stationary direct, you may be reminded about what you are good at. What makes you special. What makes you an individual. There are things that everyone can do. Everyone can do relatively well. But there are other things which require real expertise, and very few people can do them well. And that's what you should be thinking about. And ideally, you should be focusing on what makes you special, not just trying to follow the crowd, just trying to do an okay job. That's not what it's about. It's about doing things in a way that is, but potentially quite superb. And so this is very much, Scorpio, the way forward. And the Saturn's going stationary direct because Saturn's in Pisces, and of course the moon is moving through Pisces as well. So that really does emphasize with Saturn going stationary direct. And ideally, Scorpio, you should sort of see it in a broader chronological perspective. So Saturn was in Pisces, over the last few years. Then over summer, it went into Aries for a short period of time. Then it went retrograde, went back into Pisces, and now it's going back and back and back into Pisces. Now it's gone. Saturn has gone stationary direct, and so what it is, Pisces, is about you being reminded of what makes you different, what makes you special, what abilities you have that that no one else has, or very few people have, and what are you doing to harness them? And perhaps over the last couple of months you've had your concerns. You may have felt that you weren't really fulfilling your potential completely, and now that Saturn is going direct, the benefit here of Saturn going direct is you realizing that you can do it. You can really make your mark. And it's not just a one-day thing. Saturn is going to move through the last 5 degrees of Pisces between now and the middle of February. And so over the next couple of months, Scorpio, I really think that you should make the most of who you are. And it's certainly not a time to be compromising or worrying too much about what other people are saying or suggesting, because we are dealing with something that is fundamentally unique. And as far as the specifics of today are concerned, when we looked at the heliocentric chart, we noticed that Mars was making a trine to Chiron. So we don't see a Mars. Well, we do actually. I mean, geocentrically, Mars is moving towards a trine of Chiron. I mean, it's quite a long way off. It's 7 degrees off. But heliocentrically, we've got an exact Mars-Chiron trine. So there is some Mars-Chiron energy today, and Mars is your ruler. And as I said in the introduction, Mars trine Chiron can be about wanting to do things differently, wanting to assert yourself in a way that other people notice. And you don't want to just make a fuss for the sake of it, but there are certain key areas, Scorpio, where perhaps you do need to stand up and stand out, and you shouldn't worry too much about the impact you're having. Other people might not like what you're doing, but it seems to be fundamentally about you, and you realizing that you are different, but you are different in a completely positive way. It's because you just have things that just other people don't have, and maybe if there is resistance, it could be jealousy. But being open and honest, of course, it has costs. It can create unpleasantness. It can create criticism, but it also has benefits, real benefits. It has existential benefits, and it's about you being yourself and not being ashamed of being yourself, and realizing that you've got something to offer that really now is the time. And it's again, today might be the beginning, and so over the next couple of months, as Saturn is moving through late Pisces, really, give it your best shot, and don't be satisfied with second best. Sagittarius, first quarter moon today. So, we had a new moon, a week ago, and that new moon was in late Scorpio, but the sun has moved on. The sun is now in Sagittarius, and this first quarter moon is, if you like, your first opportunity to really make the most of the lunar cycle. What is it that you're supposed to be doing in this lunar cycle? And okay, the sun is in Sagittarius, so with the sun in Sagittarius, that's good. You can be yourself. It's a time of year where you have perhaps more freedom than usual. You can shake things up. You can be perhaps more forthcoming, than perhaps you had been sort of earlier in the year. But it's challenged by the moon in Pisces. And now that challenge is, I think, completely fortunate, because the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter. Jupiter is, of course, your ruler. So with moon square sun, you might think that all the answers are out there, that this is a time for you, to be yourself and to live out in the open. If you're particularly if you're an extroverted Sagittarian. But the first quarter moon is asking you to be reflective. You don't have to be totally reflective. You don't have to be reflective for weeks on end or anything like that. But as you move into the weekend, there are things you need to consider, and you need to get your priorities right. And you might need to, for example, think about the needs of your family and spending time at home, and something needs to be grounded. So it just could be, Sagittarius, that there is something that has revealed itself that might have seemed exciting, but on its own there may be limits to how far it can go because it's not grounded. And this is perhaps the first action. That is what the first quarter moon is about. It's about saying, well, we have to take a stand here. There's something we need to do. If we don't do it now, we're going to miss our chance. And what you need to do is make sure that you really are grounded, at all levels. You can't just do whatever you like without reference to where you belong, and perhaps even to the past as well, and things which relate to the past. That might include your family. So a sensible, grounded approach might be worthwhile, especially as we've got no planets in Earth signs at the moment except for Uranus. And this lack of Earth means that a lot of people aren't very grounded. They're not really attached to anything. But you need to make sure that you are attached, that you are tethered to the ground, because we don't want a situation where you are just wandering off. That would be unfortunate. Though I'm not saying that it needs to be a difficult day. I mean, it's not a difficult day because the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter. It's just that you have to understand where your strengths are short term, and there is an emotional side to the moon being in mutual reception to Jupiter, and do listen to your feelings. You may not want to listen to your feelings, but they do matter. And additionally, you're capable of picking up on all sorts of interesting information coming in at all levels. And you're in a situation where the channels of communication, they are open. So if there's something you want to know about, find out about, it's all there. And Sagittarius, you might actually find out more than you expected. And don't forget, you can find out things in many different ways. You can ask questions, you can read, you can watch, you can feel, you can use your psychic abilities. It's all available to you. And that may be one reason why you need to be grounded, because if you're at the receiving end of a lot of information, there's a lot of things happening, you need to be in a position where you can process it all. And once you've processed it all, you'll be ready for the next stage. Perhaps you have to wait until the moon moves into Aries. I mean, the moon, when does the moon move into Aries? Sort of sometime over the weekend. But that's something I'll be talking about in my next video. Capricorn. Saturn matters if you're a Capricorn. I mean, Saturn is your ruler, and Saturn is going stationary direct, and what that means is that from the Earth's point of view, Saturn is at a standstill, complete standstill, at 25 degrees 9 minutes Pisces. Now, does that mean that you feel at a standstill? I mean, it could. It might feel that you've gone as far as you can possibly go in a particular direction, and you've done well. You've gone over some old material, and you're better informed, and you perhaps also feel that it's all very well knowing things, but where is the action? What is the next stage? And so, with Saturn going stationary direct, there could be a slight feeling of frustration that nothing is happening because you're not moving. So yeah, it could feel that you're not moving, but I think that is perhaps positive. You have to have those moments of total inaction where everything has stopped, because as soon as things have totally stopped, well, they start moving again. And Saturn very soon will be in action, will be moving forward through Pisces, through the last 5 degrees of Pisces, and in February it will move into Aries, and that is a big event. And so as far as where you are at the moment, it's just be a moment of pause. And as I said, it's good to pause. And at the same time, we've got Mercury is about to go stationary direct as well. So that sort of adds to the power of Saturn being stationary direct. And while Saturn is stationary direct, you may be thinking about certain gaps in your knowledge. We've all got gaps in our knowledge, all of us. So I'm not trying to be critical here, but it just might be that you are aware of there are things you should know more about, and you can definitely take action. So if there are gaps, you can fill them, and you can have them completely filled by the middle of February, by February the 14th, when Saturn moves into Aries. So what is it that you need to know about? What is it that you need to learn about? I think that you kind of know what it is, and being a Capricorn, you're quite sensible, you're realistic, you're capable of self-criticism, and you can work hard, you can study hard as well. So if you want to catch up, then for sure you can, and maybe that's an advantage of Saturn being stationary direct. You have a sense of what needs to be done, and also what needs to be learnt, and you, Capricorn, have at the same time a fundamental sense of optimism. You know that things are going to work out. All you have to do is just follow the plan. You know where you're deficient. You know what needs to be done, and yeah, you can be positive. So if you have wonderful ideas about the future, then those ideas can happen. I mean, you would not have these ideas if they were unrealistic, at least if you're a typical Capricorn. I mean, Capricorns tend to be realistic. You don't go off on flights of fantasy. So if you really do believe that something can happen, then I think that it will happen. I mean, if you want it to happen, that is. And this optimism can be quite infectious, and it's connected with the the grand trine. We've still got Venus trine Jupiter. And Saturn is still on the Venus Jupiter midpoint. That's what I'm talking about with this optimism. The fact that Saturn is still on that Venus Jupiter midpoint, and so you are not just optimistic, but I think you can actually be lucky as well. In your own quiet way. I'm not saying it's going to be dramatic lottery winning luck, but you can make your own luck. and with the right approach, you can really make make things happen. And additionally, you can also make sense of certain things, and this might be connected with the fact we've got a first quarter moon. So this first quarter moon, you've got Sun in Sagittarius, Moon in Pisces, and it's possible that it is a time when some things are hidden, not by you, but perhaps by other people. They're hiding things. They're not necessarily being entirely honest. It may not be just other people. Just in general, things are being hidden, and your job perhaps is to verbalize what is being hidden. To talk about perhaps what other people are not saying. You can talk about them to yourself, but the key thing is they get verbalized. It's not necessarily the case that they have to be verbalized to an audience, but it goes back also to what I was saying about thinking, perhaps studying as well. You can uncover things which basically need to be uncovered, and that might be something that needs to happen today with this first quarter moon, because once you uncover things, once you realize the truth of a matter, then you're able to start to contemplate the real action. And that's what this first quarter moon is about. It's about action. You understand the situation, and now you're ready to actually do something about it. And that's something you definitely can do, and you can do it really well. And your positivity and optimism can carry you forward. Aquarius. Saturn is stationary direct. It's come to a standstill. Quite when Saturn went stationary direct, I mean, it could be today, it might have been last night. I mean, certainly from an American perspective, it was last night, late last night. But it doesn't matter. This is quite a long-term thing, Saturn going stationary direct. So it's not like we should be completely focused on the exact minute that this happened. But with Saturn going stationary direct, I see it for you as being a positive. When Saturn was retrograde, there might have been times when you were unsure of yourself, you had your doubts, you wondered whether you really had the resources. And I'm thinking that in a very literal way. Resources, I'm thinking about money maybe. You were thinking maybe that there were lots of things you wanted to do, but you felt that financial concerns were holding you back. I'm not saying it was the case, but I think it could have been the case. And so that was how you perhaps experienced Saturn going retrograde. And even if it's not money, just not having the resources to do what you wanted to do. But now that Saturn is coming to a standstill, things are changing. I think you have the opportunity to really be more positive about it, to think about what you can do, not think about all the restrictions, what you can't do. And if you look at Saturn's position when it is stationary direct, it's part of a grand trine involving Venus and Jupiter. Now I'm going to be talking about that in a moment when I talk about generally what it means for Saturn to be direct. And when I say in a moment, I mean at the end of a video. But you do have to look at that condition of Saturn, and Saturn is part of that grand trine. Saturn is on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and Aquarius, I think that is tremendously positive. And so if you felt that you've been denied something, or you just didn't have the resources to do it, things are changing. The resources are available. Now, you might have convinced yourself then that they're not, and that could have been an excuse for doing nothing. But maybe the excuses are now running out. And over the next couple of months, while Saturn moves through the last 5 degrees of Pisces, this is a time for really thinking about resources, thinking about money. Maybe there may be issues regarding money that you've perhaps overcomplicated, or you've decided they're too serious for you, or I don't know, you don't want to be bothered. But now is a time to be realistic, to realize that money matters. It's not anything to be obsessed about. It's just one thing that needs to be considered. And so that might well be how Saturn going direct is working for you. And I do think that it's positive, and you shouldn't be afraid of being, overly materialistic. It's okay. And when Saturn goes into Aries in February, that will change the emphasis. But for the moment, Saturn is in Pisces, and Pisces, from an Aquarian perspective, like it or not, is quite a sort of financially orientated sign. But Saturn is not just about money. We could just see it in a very general sense. So if Saturn is going stationary direct Aquarius, this might just mean that you have gone as far as you can possibly go in a particular direction. Maybe you've been reviewing things, revising things. You might have felt quite stuck at the same time, but you've gone as far as you can, and now it's time to move things forward now. And so you can really be quite optimistic about it. Optimism does matter. Remember, Saturn is on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. So, whatever it is, and again, I'm not just talking about money, there is a place for optimism. Aquarians can be quite negative because Aquarius is a Saturn-ruled sign. But right now, you should be confident that things are working out, that the wheels are turning. And so, Aquarius, the future is there, and the future is there to be enjoyed. And of course, Pluto is now in Aquarius. I know Pluto has been in Aquarius for some time, but it may not be until Saturn goes stationary direct that you can start to appreciate Pluto being in Aquarius. Perhaps Saturn has been holding that back, and Aquarius is about maybe you as a visionary, or you as being able to do things which are interesting, and not just interesting, but which relate to the future, because Aquarius is a future-orientated sign, and you don't want to dwell in the future without any grounding. Perhaps that's what Saturn stationary direct is about. You ground yourself, and you align yourself to the future, and you work towards the future. And indeed, you can be optimistic about this future. Pisces. We're talking a lot about Saturn. Saturn is a major theme of this video. And the reason Saturn is a major theme of this video is because it's stationary direct. It's been going backwards for some time, and now it's coming to a standstill. And it's coming to a standstill in your sign. You're a Pisces, Saturn's in Pisces, and with Saturn in Pisces, it's been in Pisces, on and off for a few years, and I think that's been a real benefit to you. Saturn is a planet which is about discipline. It's about getting things together, and it's about respecting yourself. And with Saturn going stationary direct, you should have a strong sense of who you are and your boundaries. Saturn is a planet of boundaries, and so with Saturn in Pisces, you're not going to get washed away. Pisces is a sign that one sort of associates with the ocean, and sometimes the average Pisces can get sort of caught up in the tide, and they can get swept away temporarily. But with Saturn going through Pisces, maybe you've had a chance to find your anchor, to really realize what is important. And when you've got Saturn stationary direct, that really does indicate this is a time when you're aware of that anchor and the anchor chain, and what is important to you, what you are anchored to. And perhaps also, but by staying in one place, you have a chance to really benefit from everything. People talk about travel. Oh, it's good to travel. Travel's great. But the trouble about travel is that you never stay long enough in a place to really understand it and to take advantage of it and to benefit from it, and you don't even understand what's going on. And so with Saturn stationary direct, you perhaps have an idea of where you work best, how you function on sort of on top form, and so that can be something of a revelation. And as I was just suggesting, when you are in one place, when you're in the right place, then things start to work. You find the place where you are on best form, and Saturn is going stationary direct on the Venus Jupiter midpoint, and Venus Jupiter is that's a wonderful pair, a very lucky pair of planets. And so if Saturn is on the Venus Jupiter midpoint, perhaps where your luck is now. One principle of astrology is, we talk about astrocartography, if you know about that, the idea that there are certain places on Earth where we are lucky. There are other places where we're unlucky. But maybe you're starting to understand where you are lucky, and also perhaps where you're less fortunate. And it's not just about geography. It's just about what you're doing, what activities you're involved with, and the people you're involved with. People have a big influence on luck. Some people are lucky for you. If you spend time with them, things work well. Other people are just bad news. They attract bad luck. Even if these people are perfectly pleasant, they can still be unlucky. So it depends. But I'm hoping, Pisces, that right now you do have a strong sense of position and positional luck, and over the next 2.5 months, between 2.5 months between now and the middle of February, as Saturn moves through the last few degrees of Pisces, you have an opportunity to really appreciate that position. But today is a time to be thinking about that, and also to be thinking about yourself and how you are important. There is a first quarter moon, with the sun in Sagittarius, moon in Pisces. I mean, in a way, the first quarter moon is sort of more interesting than the new moon itself, at least for you, Pisces, because with the moon moving through Pisces, you have an understanding of who you are and what your role is, and it goes back to your power. And the moon is conjunct the North Node, and so Pisces, I think that it's okay to put yourself first, and don't be afraid of being ambitious, and thinking about all the many ways in which you can be successful. But it's not vague. We're not talking about fantasy here. It's about just being realistic and being honest about what your strengths are, and also being honest about where the best places to be are. And you don't have to be constantly moving from one place to another. You can find somewhere where things work and where you are lucky, and perhaps you can just stay there. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it is time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 61, which is inner truth. And this hexagram is, very balanced. You can see that, it's got symmetry. You've got the top two lines are unbroken, the bottom two lines are unbroken, and then it's got this this central space in it, and it perhaps represents a moment when things become clear. We we become clear in ourselves about what is right. This might well link with the fact that Saturn is stationary direct. Saturn is about responsibility. It's about what is important, as it becomes stationary direct, Saturn comes to an absolute standstill, we see the truth, and certainly we get the truth, and we can speak the truth, and people will listen to us. And so, we are talking about the pigs and fishes. So the I Ching talks about pigs and fishes, and the I Ching is saying that pigs and fishes represent animals that just will not listen for some reason. In Chinese tradition, that pigs and fishes are seen as being the most stubborn animals of them all, but here, even the pigs and fishes do understand the truth, and this is something that we should make the most of. So if we speak the truth, then people will listen. But by the same token, we are aware of the truth. We are aware of our place. Again, Saturn going stationary direct, we think about place, and that place is clear, and it could be a real feeling of revelation that it's all there, and we can feel really very comfortable with what we have and the realizations that we have come to. And we've got two moving lines. The fifth line moves, and that really does indicate that we are emanating the truth. The truth is all around us. We're bathed in truth. Well, up to a point. We don't want to exaggerate. I mean, none of us are perfect, but we can garner a considerable amount of respect. But we don't have to shout about it. It's just what we are presenting. Now, the sixth line move, the top line moves. Now, the warning there is about shouting. Top line can be about making a lot of noise and moving beyond the situation in a way that could potentially be undesirable. We might find ourselves talking too much. We might feel that we have to shout about the truth, but the truth cannot be shouted about. And one image that the I Ching gives with this top line is the rooster, and the rooster would be an animal that makes a lot of noise, makes a huge amount of noise, and we can make as much noise as we like, but no one's going to listen, and it will not take us to heaven. And that's what I think the I Ching says. So it's not, if you like, about being evangelical about the truth. The truth can be quite private. It's not something we wear. It's not something we force onto anyone. We can't make ourselves more virtuous by telling people of the truth. Either they get the truth or they don't get the truth. They understand or they don't understand. It's not about proselytizing. And we're not going to impress anyone by shouting about the truth. Although this might not just be about us, it might be about someone else. Someone else might be very sure of themselves, so sure of themselves that they want to shout about it and get attention, but no one's going to listen. I mean, it will just seem stupid and pointless. So the truth is something private. Some people realize it, other people don't, and we carry the truth with us. It's not something that we just talk about, shout about. That's absolutely not the right approach. And talking about approaches, we have the second hexagram, the hexagram that this hexagram moves, the first hexagram moves to, and the hexagram it moves to is hexagram number 19, which is approach. And so approach is quite a sociable hexagram. It's about getting closer to people. And we get hints about how that happens. So the previous hexagram, Inner Truth, is us being just balanced, knowing where we're going, knowing what's right, knowing what's wrong, not shouting about it, just being honest without being noisy. And we then are able to attract people, hence approach. So if we're trying to get closer to people, we don't have to try. It's just it's something very natural. It just happens. And we should realize that there may be a time limit on it. We get closer to people, we benefit from their company, they benefit from our company, but nothing lasts forever. There is that warning in the I Ching with 90 with hexagram 19, when the 8th month comes, there's misfortune. Of course, the 8th month is sort of, from a northern hemisphere perspective, I think, from a northern hemisphere Chinese perspective, is sort of late summer. But we shouldn't be thinking too much beyond the situation. But with the right approach, and being authentic and not proselytizing, not evangelizing, that is a way to get people onto our side, to get people to approach us. And in the short term, I think that is a good thing. So overall, it looks like being quite a good day, and it's a day when we can understand the truth, and because we understand the truth, and because we don't shout about that truth, we can win other people's confidence. And finally, there is Saturn going stationary direct. And so let's look at the chart for that moment when Saturn goes stationary direct, because it does happen at a very precise moment. It happens at I think that's 3:51 a.m. London time. I think I've got that right. I'll just check. I mean, it's got to be right on this one. Saturn goes to 3:51 a.m. Yeah, so that's a moment Saturn comes to a standstill, and it's an important moment, and because when a planet comes to a standstill, you have everything is frozen. And you have to look at what that planet is involved in. I mean, you also have to look at the fact that whenever you have a planet coming to a standstill, particularly a planet like Saturn, there is a change. Naturally, there has to be a change of emphasis, and it could be quite subtle at first. It may be difficult to see it, at the time. But nonetheless, when we think about the massive changes that are happening in the world, I mean, I know there's always massive changes happening, but I think if you think that for example, Trump winning the election in a year ago, that was a really big event. It's not just about Trump. I know people love to personalize things, but it's not just about Trump. People sort of bemoan the fact that Trump was elected, but the reason Trump was elected was because he had to be elected, because that's what fate wanted. It was fated. I just remember that. And as Trump got elected, things changed. People got sort of less concerned about, not concerned, but it was people. It's been commonly said that Trump getting elected was the death of woke, and people not being so obsessed with diversity, and diversity officers in big companies suddenly losing their jobs, diversity departments going, but also that sort of wokeness and the sensitivity of wokeness kind of came to an end. And I think that Trump's election, when Trump was elected, Saturn and Neptune were in late Pisces, and both planets went into Aries, and now they're back. Now they're both back in Pisces, and it's maybe interesting that with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, there's been sort of more criticism of Trump of Trump, and also in the elections, the Republicans didn't do too well, and maybe that's a feature of Saturn and Neptune being in Pisces. I mean, I don't know, but the point is that Saturn is going to go back into Aries pretty soon in February, and Neptune's going to go back into Aries even sooner. And so with Saturn and Neptune moving back into Aries, things are going to change again. And with Neptune and Aries, people certainly with Neptune and Aries, I think people are going to be looking for leadership. I don't know whether Trump is the right person to provide that leadership, but whatever country people are in, people are going to want strong leadership. That I think is going to be a feature. But maybe I'm digressing, and we should be looking more precisely at what it means for Saturn to be direct. And when you look at Saturn direct, you have to look at what is it aspecting? What is it actually doing when it is direct? And Saturn is direct as part of a grand trine. Okay, it's not exact, this grand trine, but Saturn is trine Jupiter, it is trine Venus, it's even widely trine Mercury, and Saturn is on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. And so the Jupiter and Venus influence, that may say something about what this Saturn is direct is about. Now, it's easy to be negative with astrology, and perhaps if you want to make a criticism about me, is I tend to focus on the negatives. I tend to focus on bad events. I mean, good events are just more difficult to think about, and astrology perhaps does focus on the negative, or at least my astrology tends to. But you could say that this Saturn direct isn't such a bad thing. The fact that it is trining Venus, trining Jupiter. We do have Jupiter trine Saturn, and next year that Jupiter trine Saturn is going to be exact. It's going to be absolutely exact when you're going to have Jupiter in Leo and Saturn in Aries, and this can be connected with a business cycle. It's in theory is supposed to be the best part of a business cycle. So I know that, for example, a lot of people are predicting that the stock market is going to collapse. People are always predicting the stock market is going to collapse. I don't think the stock market is going to collapse next year. I think it will collapse in the end. Of course, it will always collapse in the end. But with Saturn going direct on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, you could regard this as being quite a positive for the world. That things are coming together. This is the best part of the Jupiter-Saturn cycle. Traditionally, when you're about, about say 6 years after the Jupiter, approximately 6 years after the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, when Jupiter and Saturn are in trine, is when the business cycle is at its peak. And here we've got Saturn, stationary on the Venus Jupiter midpoint, and we can look at this from a 90-degree dial perspective, just to look at the midpoints, to look at all the midpoints that Saturn is on. So there's Saturn. So there's Saturn, pretty close to the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. So there's Venus, there's Jupiter. So Saturn on that midpoint, does, to my mind, look pretty positive. It's also on the Sun-Hades midpoint. Now that being on the Sun-Hades midpoint, isn't necessarily so good. But the Venus-Jupiter and the Sun-Hades. I mean, you could say that Sun-Hades is about things that are unpleasant and things which are in a state of decay. But then you've also got the benefits of it also of being on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and it could be that where there are things that are unpleasant, there are ways to benefit. It might be that people can benefit in a way that is a bit underhand, and there's a criminality to it, perhaps. But a lot of people will be able to benefit, and I don't regard this. I don't in general regard Saturn direct as being a particularly bad thing. I think that it might represent a time where temporarily people feel more prosperous. I mean, I know we're living in times when people feel very negative about themselves and the economy, but just things might just keep going for a bit longer. I mean, long term, as you move beyond 2026, then I do think that things are going to move from bad to worse. But I think that I think Saturn going stationary direct, it needn't be such a bad thing. Now, it will affect certain people, so I'm just quickly going to look at some people, and maybe countries that might be affected by Saturn going stationary direct. And let's start off with Brigitte Macron. So here's Brigitte Macron's horoscope, and Brigitte Macron has her Mercury at 2554 Pisces. So with Mercury at 2554 Pisces, so what that means is that Saturn is going stationary on Brigitte Macron's Mercury. So it's like Saturn is like the candle flame. I think it was, I mean, I use this analogy every now and then, so forgive me if you've heard it before, but it's just a good way of understanding retrograde. So there was a book, I think it was written by Stephen Arroyo. Stephen Arroyo, I did read some of his books in the 1980s, but I think it was Stephen Arroyo who explained, I think it was him, who explained the power of stationary and retrograde motion with the analogy of a candle flame. So if you have a candle flame, you can move your finger through this candle flame and it doesn't hurt. But when you've got a planet going stationary, it stops. So it's like a planet going stationary direct or stationary retrograde. It's like your finger stopping in the candle flame. Now, if you stop your finger in the candle flame, you are going to get seriously burnt. It's going to be agony. And that could be the same thing with a planet going stationary direct or retrograde. It stops there, and you feel the full blast of it. Okay, it could be good if it's a fortunate planet, but if it's a planet like Saturn, and you're Brigitte Macron, she's got Mercury in Pisces in the 8th house. So she's with Saturn stationing on her Mercury. This could be a time when she's not feeling particularly happy. That could say something about her perceptions. Of course, she had all this stuff with Candace Owens and that lawsuit about, whether with Candace Owens claiming that Brigitte Macron was a man, and that can't have helped. And I think she's going to be difficult. So that may also have an impact on her husband, Emmanuel Macron. And so we probably will never find out what it means for Saturn to be stationary on her Mercury, but it could be quite tough, and it may say something about her feelings and what she's like to have around. I mean, Saturn on the Mercury could mean that she's quite harsh in what she says, what she, for example, says to her husband. But it might have some impact on her mental health and how she's feeling about herself, and what's going on around her. And turning to Britain, if you've been, I want to talk about the budget at some stage, but there's a new Home Secretary, relatively new Home Secretary, it's like Minister of the Interior, Shabana Mahmood, who's born on September the 17th, 1980, and she has her sun at 2442 Virgo, And if you're Home Secretary in Britain, it's the most difficult job. It normally doesn't work well. People don't like Home Secretaries because they blame them for crime. They blame them for anything that goes wrong. They would, of course, immigration is a big issue. Illegal immigration is a big issue. People coming over the channel in boats. So she's in the firing line for that. And so she's got Saturn on her sun. So as Home Secretary, Saturn going stationary on her sun, may not be much fun for her. And turning to very briefly to Russia, I noticed that I think Andrei Belousov is the Russian defense minister, and he has got his sun at 2602 Pisces. So he's got Saturn opposition his sun. So if you've got Saturn stationary opposition your sun, sorry, let me make this clear. Conjunct her sun. Saturn's in Pisces, so Saturn is stationary conjunct his sun with Brigitte Macron. So with Shabana Mahmood, Saturn was opposition her sun, but going stationary opposition her sun. With Belousov, it was conjunct the sun, and so that could be about responsibility, his responsibility as a defense minister, but it might say something about the war and how the war is being conducted, or about internal departmental politics. So that's something to look at. And then turning to Canada, Mark Carney has his sun at 2549 Pisces, and he became prime minister when, just around the time of his birthday, with the sun at 2417 Pisces. So the sun, Mark Carney's sun, and the sun of him becoming prime minister are all being activated by Saturn going stationary direct. And that might mean that the next few weeks are rather difficult for him. So if you're Canadian, you might want to think about that. You might want to think about the kind of pressures that Mark Carney is under. And finally, not a person, but a country is Ukraine. So here is the horoscope of Ukraine, a country that we look at quite a lot. And what I'm thinking about is Ukraine's Mars. So Ukraine has its Mars at 25.5 Virgo. So that means, if we compare the charts, Saturn is going direct at 25.9 Pisces, which is exactly opposition Ukraine's Mars. Now, we know that the war in Ukraine is turning into a complete disaster. I know the mainstream media has been sort of saying how it's all been very slow, and it's taking ages for Russia to get anything done, and talking about Russia losing huge amounts of men and all this kind of thing. But to an extent, that is propaganda, and the reality is that Russia is winning. It's winning all the time, and this is almost certainly why Trump is pushing so hard for a resolution, because if there's not a resolution now, where's Russia going to stop? Okay, Russia's not going to stop in Paris, and Russia is going to stop in Odessa maybe, but how do you contain Russia in terms of Ukraine's borders, and how much more is Ukraine going to lose? And Saturn going stationary direct on Ukraine's Mars, well, Mars is Ukraine's armed forces. Mars is how Ukraine defends itself. And so with Saturn going direct, right opposition Ukraine's Mars, things are really bad. And this is telling us what we already know. I mean, we know that Ukraine is losing, and that the rate of Russia's gains is increasing, quite rapidly, and so it's kind of it's a bit like the First World War, isn't it? You have this long sort of attrition that goes on for 4 years, and then Germany collapsed right at the end. So kind of maybe that Ukraine is in that kind of position. But I think that Saturn opposition Ukraine's Sun is sorry, that Saturn opposition Ukraine's Mars, the fact that Saturn is stationary direct so close to Ukraine's Mars really may say something about the state of Ukraine and the state of Ukraine's armed forces. So that's it. Those are a few thoughts on Saturn going stationary direct. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.